Hi, welcome to Mrs. Bandu's Movies for Math. All right, today we're going to look at, this is Course 2, Lesson 1-3, focusing on multiplying decimals. Our objective today is to multiply decimals and do mental math using the properties of multiplication. Okay, so we've done a little bit with addition, and now we're moving on to multiplication. We're going to find that some of the properties are very similar. So we'll look at our key concepts here before we actually get started with our problems or our examples. The identity property of multiplication tells us that the product of 1 and A is A. So remember, the product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So this basically tells us that if I multiply anything by 1, I'm just going to get that same number back. That's all it tells me. So 5 times 1 is 5, or if I think of it as 1 times 5, that also gives me 5. Algebraically speaking, A times 1 is A, or 1 times A is A. So anything, any number times 1 is that number itself. Our next property is the zero property. The zero property tells us that the product of any number and 0 is 0. Okay, so if you multiply anything by 0, we know that we get 0, and there is actually a property for that called the zero property. Okay, so again, with numbers, we can show that 5 times 0 is 0. Also, 0 times 5 is 0. Algebraically, which means basically that we have variables, A times 0 is 0. 0 times A is 0. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you have a number or if you have a variable, the rule still applies. All right, the commutative property of multiplication is similar to that of addition. So it basically tells us that changing the order of the factors does not change the product. Okay, so remember, the factors are the numbers that we are multiplying together. The product is actually the answer or the result of that multiplication. So I could say that 5 times 2 gives me the same answer as 2 times 5. We all know that both of those give us 10. Algebraically, A times 2 is the same as 2 times A. Both of those give us the result of 2A. Okay? And our final property that we want to look at is the associative property of multiplication. And that tells us that changing the grouping of factors does not change the product. Okay, very similar to that of addition. Again, I can regroup if I have just multiplication in a problem. I can regroup and I will still end up with the same product or final answer. So here I have the quantity 3 times 2 times 5. I can rewrite that as the 3 times the quantity 2 times 5. Okay, remember we say the quantity when we're including something in parentheses. Algebraically, the quantity A times B times C is equal to A times the quantity B times C. Okay, so that right there gives us our list of properties or key concepts that we want to use in this section. Okay, let's look at a few of our examples now. Multiplying decimals. Estimate 11.4 times 3.6 and then find the product. Okay, so our estimate would be something perhaps like 11 times 4 is 44. Okay, So that tells me that the ballpark answer here needs to be somewhere around 44. All right, so our steps for multiplication follow. First of all, we multiply as if the numbers are whole numbers. So we do not necessarily, actually we do not line up the decimal points. We line up by digits starting with from the left. Okay, so we end up with 114. Underneath it we have a 3 under the second one and a 6 under the 4, and then we do our multiplication. So 6 times 4 is 24, carry a 2. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 2 is 8, and 6 times 1 is 6. Okay. Some people will like to put in a 0 here or an X so it holds place. If you want to do that, you can. If you do not need to, that's perfectly fine as well. I suggest probably that most of you are going to want to do that because it's easy to forget. Now I'm going to multiply each of these by 3. And my first answer is going to go directly under the 3. See how I am keeping everything lined up. 3 times 4 is 12. Carry 1. 3 times 1 is 3 and 1 is 4. And 3 times 1 is 3. Okay, so I've multiplied by the 6 and also by the 3. I'm ready now to add the products I have so that I have the products for my final answer. So 4 plus 0 is 4, 8 plus 2 is 10, carry 1, 6 and 4 is 10, plus 1 is 11, so I carry another 1, 3 plus 1 is 4. So my digits are 4, 1, 0, 4. Okay? So, I'm going to go back over here now. It says locate the decimal point in the product by adding decimal places in the factor. Instead of rewriting the whole problem here, I'm going to do it in here, okay? So if I look at my numbers, this was actually a point here and a point here. So I'm going to, this is 1 place, 2 place. Since I have 2 places in the factors, that means I should have 2 places behind the decimal point in my answer, 1, 2. So my decimal point goes between the 1 and the 0. So my answer is 41.04. Okay. That process is basically repeated over here as well. Another way of thinking about this is that this is in the 10th place, this is in the 10th place. Tenths times tenths is hundredths, and hundredths takes up 2 decimal places. Again, the trick though is simply to count 1, 2, 1, 2. So if you want to fill in here, this is 1 decimal place, this is 1, all right, and then I'm just refilling the numbers in just so you see. I'm not trying to change anything. But really, most of the time, you're definitely not going to want to write the problem twice. Okay? All right, check for reasonableness. The product, 41.04, is close to the estimate of 44. Okay? And that is, so it's reasonable. When you multiply and divide, you're going to find that your estimates are probably going to be a little more off than when you're adding or subtracting. So don't let that don't let that throw you too much. Okay. All right. Let us turn to the back page. We're going to do some more multiplication, and here we're going to use some mental math. So we'll talk through it, and then we'll look at why it works as well, because this is, to me, this is thinking through it. This is the process that you go through, okay? So I want to find 2 times 4.097 times 0.5. What you think. Okay, so in a case like this, you need to survey the question, see what I might be able to do. Again, I'm going to look for compatible numbers. Numbers that I can multiply together in my head and give me something easy to work with. Remember that 0.5 is another name for 1/2. So if I take 2 times 0.5, or half of 2, my product is 1. Then the product of 1 and 4.097 is 4.097. Okay? So by seeing how 2 and 1/2 work together, I can get a 1, and then the problem becomes very simple. Okay, so basically this is why it works, because first of all, in my head, after I looked at this, I move the 2 and the 5 together. Maybe not physically, but I move them together in my head. And that is applying the commutative property. All right. The next thing is I multiply these 2 together in my head by associating them. In other words, I grouped them together and did those first because it was easy. So that's the associative property. Sorry, I spelled that wrong there. A-S-S-O-C-I-A-T-I-V-E. Associative property. So that gave me the 1. And now I simplify. 1 times 4.097 is 4.097. And this, in fact, is the identity property of multiplication, telling us that 1 times anything is that number that you multiplied by. Okay, what I would like you to have prepared for tomorrow are the quick check questions and any others that you might have. Remember that you can always play this over and over again if you miss something the first time, or you can pause it as you go. I'll see you in math class.